There's two things in society that we are never supposed to talk about: politics and religion. It's funny, yesterday, Sandy and I were in North Bay and we were talking to some people, and religion came up. And they're like, oh, we don't want to get into that. But, we're not supposed to talk about religion. They had no issue talking about politics, though. Everyone seems to have an opinion on that today, whether it be on this side of the border or the other side of the border, but I don't really care. We're not here to talk about that in any way whatsoever. But if we're not supposed to talk about politics and religion in the church, there's also a taboo subject that we're never supposed to talk about, and that's money. Whenever the preacher starts talking about money, it's like, oh dear, where's this guy going with this? What's he want, and so on and so forth. But we don't like talking about money. But it's interesting because if you look at Jesus and the way that he dealt with money, Jesus had 38 parables that he taught in the scriptures. 16 of them had something to do with money or possessions. So it's almost half. Interesting. The Gospels are amazing because 1 out of 10 verses, 1 out of 10, that's 288 verses just in the Gospels, deal directly with the subject of money. That's 10%. It's kind of interesting, tithing. You want to look at it from that way. But 10% of the scriptures in the Gospels have to do with money. Listen to this. The Bible offers 500 different verses about prayer. There's under 400 verses that talk about faith. But if you look at the verses that talk about money or possessions and how we're supposed to use them, there's over 2,000. So to say that the Bible doesn't talk about money and Jesus doesn't talk about money and the parables don't talk about money would be wrong. There's a lot of talk about this. And why do I want to talk about money today? Well, this afternoon we're going to have our AGM, which we all look so forward to. But we're going to talk about the AGM. And the biggest thing, and the time that we spend the most time on, is the budget. We have to look at the budget, and we do this because from Revenue Canada and from the government of Canada, we have to have a meeting every year, and we have to present a budget of what we're going to spend and what we're going to look at, and so on and so forth. And that has to be voted on by the members, and it has to be approved. So I thought, let's talk about giving. I finished 2 Peter last week, and I wanted to do something just a little bit different today because we're going into this. I could have had a message on food because that's what everyone's mind is on right now, is what's cooking right now. I've got ribs up in the office there cooking right now. So you may, if you need a spare rib, you'll get one today. I was told yesterday that I need to be very prudent on getting my dessert early, correct? I was hoping that she would make 2 of them and I get to take one of them home, but I guess that didn't happen. So it crossed her mind. She didn't care enough about me, so didn't have enough stuff. Well, I was saying if you have enough stuff, but anyway, we're not going to talk about food today. We're going to talk about money. We're going to talk about our giving, and we as a congregation and as individuals have a privilege to be able to give back to God, to be able to give back to the community, be able to give back to different charities and so on and so forth. And we'll decide on some of those today of whether we'll continue with those. And typically we pass those, but that's a privilege. But it's not just a privilege; it's also a responsibility that we have of giving back to God. I want us to talk about the biblical perspective of what giving is all about. Each week we give our contribution, and since COVID, it's kind of changed. Remember we used to pass the plate around, and it would pass by you, and hopefully you didn't use that as a way to break bills or anything like that. But Now what we do is we just have a bucket in the back, and we give our weekly contribution. And for some of us, it's like, well, I'm paying my dues, my membership dues for coming to church, and this is something I have to do. It's a lot bigger than that. Our giving is a spiritual barometer of where we're at in our relationship with God. You can look at the way we give and we say, well, do I look at it from just a membership viewpoint that I'm paying my dues? If I'm not there, then that means I don't have to pay. I would assume that the gun club has a membership due every year that you have to pay. Now, if you miss a whole bunch of meetings, do you get deducted on that? 3 givings or three meetings. But if you miss 3 meetings, they wouldn't give you money back on your dues. Yeah. You give your dues, and you're expected to give those every year, and we're expected to give to God. But some of us, we have the mentality that, well, I didn't go to church today, so therefore I don't have to pay for what the guy preached about that day. So anyway, I want us to look, as I said, at some biblical perspective. I want you to go back to Proverbs chapter 3. We're going to look at what Solomon had to say. Solomon was, it's funny, we call him an extremely wise man, wisest of all, but I have a hard time accepting that with a man that had that many wives and concubines. But anyway, he was a wise man, it says, and this was wise instruction in Proverbs chapter 50 that he was giving to his sons. If he had that many wives, I wonder how many sons he had. That would have been a whole coliseum of men to come together to be able to talk to. But this was the instruction that he gave his sons that I want us to look at. In verse 7 of Proverbs, I'm sorry, not Proverbs. Yes, Proverbs 3. I'm looking at something else. I'm in a totally different area here. Proverbs 3, verse 5. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him or acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. What's this got to do about money? Well, listen to what he says here. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. Here Solomon is giving his sons some wise advice. He's giving them advice on how to live their lives. And he says in verse 6, I want you to acknowledge the Lord. In verse 5, he says, I want you to trust in the Lord. And then in verse 9, he says, I want you to honor the Lord. And we're going to look at those 3 different things: to acknowledge, to trust, and to also honor the Lord, and how that comes about in our giving. So the first one in verse 6, it says, I want you to acknowledge the Lord. I believe that acknowledging the Lord is the first and foremost thing that we need to do when we give. When we can acknowledge who God is and his greatness and the way that he's blessed us, the same as what Dave led us in this morning, when we count our blessings and we name them one by one, when we look and see how great the Lord is, that he has given us so much, it's at that point that we're able to acknowledge him and see who he is. But we need to understand something. I want you to go back to Psalm chapter 50. Psalm 50 and verse 7. We need to understand something about who we are and who God is. Psalm 50 verse 7 says, listen, my people, and I will speak. I will testify against you, Israel. I am God, your God. I bring no charges against you concerning your sacrifices or concerning your burnt offerings, which are ever before me. But he says, I have no need of a bull from your stall or a goat from your pens. For every animal of the forest is mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know every bird in the mountains, and the insects in the field are mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world is mine and all that is in it. I think we need to have a good understanding of when we acknowledge God that he doesn't need us. It's not like this contribution or this giving that we give to him. He needs it because, if he doesn't, he's not going to be able to run the affairs of the nation. You look at what's going on in the world today and all the different leaders that are trying to figure out, how can I get my nation to do better? How can I support my nation so we can get down the debt and so on and so forth? God doesn't need it. He has everything he needs, but what he wants is to be acknowledged and for us to remember that everything that we do have comes from him. And therefore, by us giving to him, and I like the way that Solomon says it, I want you to give your first fruits. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's the whole idea of us giving of our very best. It's not the leftovers that we give him, but we give God our very best. We need to understand that God is or does not need anything, and he doesn't. He's all powerful, and he wants to bless us, and he wants to take care of us, and he wants us to be able to use the gifts that he's given us in order to bless him and others around us. You don't have to be a Christian to even understand this. I want to read something that Stephen King, a famous American author of horror stories of all things and movies, this is what he wrote. And he's not a Christian, but listen to this. A couple of years ago, I found out what you can't take it with you means. You ever heard that saying? You can't take it with you, the end of your life. He found out what that meant. I found out while I was lying in a ditch at the side of a country road covered with mud and blood, and with the tibia of my right leg poking out of the side of my jeans like a branch of a tree taken down in a thunderstorm. I had a MasterCard in my wallet, but when you're lying in a ditch with broken glass in your hair, no one accepts a MasterCard. We come in naked and broke. We may be dressed when we go out, but we're just as broke. Warren Buffett, he's going to go out broke. Bill Gates, he's going to go out broke. Tom Hanks, he's going to go out broke. Elon Musk is going to go out broke. Stephen King, broke. Not a crying dime left, he says. All the money you earn, all the stocks you buy, all the mutual funds you trade, all of that is mostly smoke and mirrors. It's still going to be a quarter past, getting late, everywhere you tell time, whether it's on a Timex or whether it's on a Rolex. So I want you to consider making your life one long gift to others. And why not? All you have is on loan anyway. All that lasts is what you pass on. Now imagine a nice little backyard surrounded by a board fence. Dad, a pleasant fellow, a little plump, is tending the barbecue. Mom and the kids are setting the picnic table, fried chicken, coleslaw, potato salad, and chocolate cake for dessert. And standing around the fence, looking in, are emancipated men and women and starving children. They're silent. They only watch. That family at the picnic is us. That backyard is America. And those hungry people on the other side of the fence watching us sit down to eat include far too much of the rest of the world. Asia and the subcontinent, countries in Central Europe where people live on the edge from one harvest to the next. South America, where they're burning down the rainforest, and most of all, Africa, where AIDS is pandemic and starvation is a fact of life. It's not a pretty picture, but we have the power to help, the power to change. And why should we refuse? Because we're going to take it with us? Please, you're not. Giving isn't about the receiver or the gift, but the giver. It's for the giver. One doesn't open one's wallet to improve the world, although it's nice when that does happen. One does it to improve oneself. A life of giving, not just money, but time, spirit, repays. It helps us remember that we're going out broke, but right now we're doing okay. Right now we have the power to do great good for others and for ourselves. So he asks, and I ask you, he says, to begin giving, to continue as you began. Now, I think you'll find at the end that you got far more than you ever had and did more good than you ever dreamed you could. Wow. That's a non-Christian. That's Stephen King, who's exceptionally rich because of all the movies and books that he's written and so on and so forth. And look at the way that he looks at giving. Look at the perspective that he has because of what experience he had when he had an accident in a ditch and understood that, hey, all that I have is worthless and I can't take it with me and it's just on loan. To some degree, he was acknowledging something greater than himself. And acknowledgement is very important, that we understand that everything that we have from God is on loan. He's got it anyway, and he's just letting us use it. The question is, are we good stewards with what he gives us? Are we using it for ourselves? Or are we using it to bless others in the community that we live in? You know, we've all understood that what happened when we became Christians is we made Jesus the Lord of our life. That means that he's in control. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have say on our wallets. Yeah, he does. And he should. And when we give or don't give, we're defining how much we believe lordship really is a part of our life. So we need to acknowledge the Lord. Then the second thing that Solomon says to his sons in verse 5, he says, I want you to trust in the Lord. How can we show our trust in the Lord? If we plan ahead in our giving, we say, you know, I'm going to give this much, and then something else comes along, you know, maybe a house repair or a car repair, and we don't give our contribution because we need to take care of that. Is that trusting in the Lord? No. You know, we're always going to have something that's going to come up. But in our giving that we've decided that we're going to give, it needs to be followed through on. Because if it doesn't, if we only give when things are going really, really well, then that's not trust. That's not faith. That's just giving out of, oh, well, it's kind of convenient right now. You know, that's why a lot of people don't like to plan ahead in their giving. I grew up with my parents teaching, and I think I've shared this before, of how important giving was. I got 27 cents a week. 7 cents went into the plate and 20 cents for us. I don't know why that was. Why did we get 27 cents, Kathy? You got 26? Well, I'm so much younger than my sister that by the time mom and dad were giving out money, inflation had happened. So, and very interesting. My mother had always said that her father taught her at a very young age that when you make your budget, the very top line is your giving, and you work from there down. It's not, okay, well, yeah, we need to remember the giving and we put it in there. Well, I got to pay the bills, got to pay the mortgage. No, it was always number one. It's interesting, if you look at our spreadsheet that we'll look at this afternoon, what's the top line? Budget, of the budget. Pardon? You switch it the other way because no. But the top line is always our contribution. And that's really where it needs to be. It needs to be the forefront of our mind that, okay, what I'm going to give is going to be really showing the amount of my trust in God. That can be fearful, though, some of the time. It can be fearful to trust in God, and as things come along, and it's hard some of the time to step out in faith. But what that behavior declares and says in our life is that, I'm not going to trust in myself anymore, but I'm going to put my trust in God. And that's really what lordship is all about, where we're putting our trust in Him, and He's going to help us and give us the ability to be able to get through it. Proverbs 3, verse 5 says this: trust the Lord with all of your hearts and lean not on your own understanding. If we trusted the Lord in all our heart in our giving and didn't try to figure out, okay, well, how can I make sure that I get just the right? Just trust in God. And don't lean on your own understanding. And that's what planned giving is all about. It's all about trust. And it's all about what you really believe in. Here's a couple of quotes. Bob Perk says this: it's one thing to say that you believe in something, but so much more to prove it. Yeah, I really believe in this whole idea of being together as a church and being in a community, and that I need to give, but I'm really reluctant to give my money because there's got to be a trust issue there. Hudson Taylor said, unless there is an element of risk in our exploits for God, there's no need for faith. That's an interesting one. Unless there is an element of risk in our exploits for God. I remember Doug Lightning told me about a guy down in Texas that was a businessman. And he was a very successful businessman. And he would give to the church every week, and he had a set amount. But what happened is when business was really bad and it wasn't looking good, at those points, he gave double. Because he wanted to show his trust in God. Didn't cut it in half. Well, God, I know you understand we're going through a tough time in business right now. We're not making as much money, so we're just going to cut back, because it's not going. He decided to give double every time that happened. That's trust. So we acknowledge God, we trust God, but then we also need to honor God. In verse 9 of what Solomon says to his sons in his wisdom, he says, I want you to honor the Lord with your wealth. He says, I want you to honor God with your first fruits. Not the leftovers, as I said, but with your first fruits. It's not giving to God the leftovers. It's not giving to God as an after, oh, yeah. Oh, don't forget to write out your contribution checks. Every Saturday night, there's different things that I do. And one of them is writing my check for contribution because I want to make sure that it's ready the next morning. Actually, I do it while I'm printing out the lessons. I have my checkbook there, and I only write one check a week. It's to the church. Everything else is debit. And, there's all kinds of different ways that you can give to churches now, and you can do it through e-transfer, and you can have it automatically. I personally, and it's whatever you want, I personally want to write a check every week because I've made a commitment, both Sandy and I have made a commitment, and we've made a vow that we're going to give this much to the church. And if it just comes out of my bank account, it's just like a bill. It's not a bill to us. It's something that we pay every week. And I want to remember that when I write Sundridge Church of Christ and I write the amount in and I sign my name to that check, I'm thinking about it. That this is a decision that I've made. So again, you want to have it taken out, e-transfer, what that's between you and God. I'm just telling you what my convictions are. And I think it's important that when we're doing it, we need to think about it and we need to honor God with it. And that's the way I see it works in my life. Our gift to God needs to be something that is planned. We need to plan out our giving. We need to think about it. Years ago, there was a movie called Shenandoah. Remember that movie? There you go. James Stewart, the leading character, Jimmy Stewart, opened the film with a prayer of thanksgiving for the meal. He calls his family in and he makes the kids sit still, and this is what he prays. Lord, we plowed the field, we planted the field, and we harvested the crop. We cooked it and put it on the table. And it wouldn't be here if it weren't for our work. But we thank you for it anyway. Amen. That's not honoring God in any way whatsoever. We need to understand that honoring God is understanding that all good gifts come from Him. And it's sad because he was really mocking God there and not accepting Him. In contrast, though, if you look at the Jews and when they were encouraged to give, in the Levitical law, they were told to give of their first fruits, we've already talked about. Not the leftovers, but the first fruits. So when they would go into the fields, they'd be like, oh, well, this part of the field's not too good, so maybe we can. No, it was they looked for the best. When they went and went through their flocks, their herds, they didn't look for the ones that were diseased. They didn't look for the ones that had blemishes on them in any way whatsoever. They looked for the very best. What did God Himself do? He sent His very best for us. He didn't hold anything back in any way whatsoever. And really, in our giving, it needs to be the same way. We do not give the leftovers. We don't give the imperfect. We don't go to a thrift store and, this is what I'm going to. It's not that in any way whatsoever. We need to give God our very, very best. Dr. Scott Caudill makes an observation about the whole idea of church and its giving. And he talks about the whole idea of the Israelites and their giving. And he makes a statement about this. He says, God, you're so good, and this was the mindset that the Israelites had. God, you're so good, and God, you're so great. Before we take any of this barley for ourselves, we want to first of all give it to you. And Lord, we're not going to give you our second best. And Lord, we're not going to give you what's left over. Oh no, we're going to give you our first fruits. Only the best is good enough for our great and wonderful God. And that was the mindset of the Israelites. They were declaring that God was worthy of praise on that great day when they brought their gifts to the temple and laid them at the priest's feet. So in our giving, we're acknowledging who God is, and we're trusting in him, and we're honoring him. You know, today we're going to talk about finances in the church. We're going to talk about the things that are needed in order for our community to be able to keep going. We're going to look at different groups that we help out and so on and so forth. And, you know, it's not just the financial that we do. I like what Dave said today. It's about our time some of the time. We offer this building to different service groups. We use this building very, very heavily at Christmas Cheer. It's used for a couple of women's groups that come in. We're actually working right now with talking to a woman that wants to start an AA group and use the building for that. And we've talked about it as a leadership group and want to pursue that to see what the ramifications are. But you know, we want to be able to use our building in such a way in our community. It's not just for us. We need to share what we have about us in the world that we live in. I want to share a part of a letter that was written to a church on why he would not give to it. And the person that wrote that is a millennialist, a millennial, and that means he's a Generation Y. He was born either in the 80s or the 90s, but he was a product of us baby boomers. So it would be kids our age. And he writes about his experience of being at a church. He says this: "My parents made me attend your Christmas program. I have to admit it was quite a spectacular, real animals and fake snow and lights that bathed the actors in red and green and gold. The production cost thousands of dollars, and geez whiz, it was worth every penny." By the way, if you're going to understand anything about our generation, it should be noted that we love sarcasm. He was being sarcastic. "The truth is, I could not have been more put off by what you put on. It was gaudy and awkward. Your jokes were not funny. Your script was predictable, and the only lights that mattered were the ones coming from the exit signs. My generation loves technology, yet we're minimalists. We're highly educated. We don't like to read. We're comfortable with uncertainty, I think. We're skeptical of corporations, and we're pretty much an expert on everything because of Google and Wikipedia." He shares some more, but goes on to say, "In politics, it is common to criticize spending. People passionately debate spending on education, welfare, campaigning, and the military, and complain how the government is wasting our precious tax dollars. Government spending is always under scrutiny. The same applies to churches. Where exactly is the money going? Is it helping others? Or is it being spent on elaborate Christmas pageants? Are you building the kingdom? Or are you building your kingdom?" Millennials are extremely conscious of how money is spent. We are the generation that demands fair trade coffee and supports eco-friendly companies, but will dump them just as quickly as they're caught greenwashing. So he asks this question: what are you doing in your community? Are you feeding and clothing the homeless? Are you hosting support groups for addicts? Are you finding childcare for single parents? These are the things my generation respects. We want to help people around us. You'll win us over if you do the same. What are you doing abroad? Organizations like Compassion International and World Vision make it so easy to care for God's children. There are too many people living in poverty and far too many churches doing nothing about it. In America alone, there are approximately 315,000 Protestant houses of worship. If each church sponsored at least one beautiful child of God, perhaps we would begin to see the kind of global impact God desires the church to have. It's a cutting letter to listen to. You know, we can look at all the issues of why our kids don't come to church, and that's a reality for a lot of us. But it's interesting to hear what they have to say. And this is just one young man's opinion of how money is spent. We talk about doing great things, and I think the crux of the matter is, are you building a kingdom or are you building your kingdom? This might be the reason why, one of the reasons, why that generation is not sitting in pews today. Because we talk about having great ideas and great programs and so on and so forth. But if we're really not taking care of the needy, taking care of really what's important in the world, and it's not about making sure that we keep the lights on, not making sure that we have a good water system, which all those things are important. But if that's what our focus is and the reason for our giving, then we've lost something somewhere. Our giving needs to have an impact on the community that we live in and the world that we live in. And we're a small little group. You think, well, I'm not going to make much of an impact. We're not going to make that. You know what? And I do want to commend the congregation. Whenever we have a fifth Sunday, I think Dave's going to share about that today, about the response of what we did 2 weeks ago with helping out with Camp Kikamon down in Mexico. You think of the different people we've been able to help along the way, the different camps that we've been able to help along the way. The way that we help out with the food bank every month, faithfully. The way that we've gotten behind Christmas cheer and helped out in that way. And basically, whenever there's a need, we meet it. So does that mean that, well, we can rest on our laurels, we've got the giving thing all figured out? No, I think we still need to understand what Solomon is saying to his sons. We need to understand that we need to acknowledge God all the time. We need to honor him in how we live our lives, and we need to sacrifice to him. See, our giving, as I said at the very beginning, is a barometer. Sometimes we have to tap the barometer to get the needle to get where it is some of the time to figure it out. But a barometer lets us know what the climate is around us, and we plan our day out with that. Our giving, our sacrifice, our tithing, whatever you want to call it, is a direct correlation of where our faith and trust in God is. And that's what Solomon says. I want you to trust in the Lord. Don't trust in your own understanding, but trust in the Lord. Acknowledge him. Just some things for us to think about. As we go into a meeting after we have some food together. But we're going to go through a whole bunch of numbers and so and so, and we'll have motions and raise your hand, and yes and no, and all that. All the stuff that we have to do, but let's not forget the heart of why we give. Understand that we'll never, ever, ever be able to outgive God. Ever. I like what Solomon says, if you give the first fruits, everything will be overflowing. I'm not here to preach a prosperity gospel in any way whatsoever. That's not my purpose. But I do know that God will bless us if we bless Him, bless others, His children in the world that we live in. Let's think on these.